we update data in the backend. If we open the website, and I'll close some of these other tabs. If we go to the home page, notice that right now we can only view the data. If we try to update this data, like we try to add to cart, it doesn't do anything. So we're going to make this add to cart button work. We'll go to our code, and we're going to find the add to cart button. So I'll open my files, and I'm going to go to the home page, and we're going to open the products grid. And we're going to scroll down in this file to this add to cart button. The first step is to make this button interactive. So at the end, we're going to add an onClick attribute equals curly brackets and give this a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. As a review, onClick is called an event handler. When we click this button, it will run this function. Now, inside here, we're going to add the product to the cart. So we could try to update the cart here in React, but then we have to figure out where to save the cart. Instead, in the real world, we use the backend to update the cart and to save the cart. The advantage of using the backend is it will simplify our React code, and we can share the data in the backend. So if we access this website from another computer, we can access the updated cart using the backend. So here, to use the backend to add a product to the cart, we're just going to make another request to the backend. We're going to go to the top, and at the top, we're going to import Axios so that we can make another request. And we'll scroll back down. And when we click this button, we're going to make a request to the backend using Axios. And this time we're going to use .post and brackets. So previously we used Axios.get to get data from the backend. Post is a different type of request. .post is used to create data in the backend. In this case, we are adding a product to the backend. So we're creating a new cart item. That's why we use .post. Inside here, we're going to give it a URL path /API/cart-items. So notice this is the same URL path that we used to get the cart, but when we use post, the backend will behave differently. This will create a cart item instead of getting the cart items. Next, we need to tell the backend which product to add to the cart. To do that, we can give Axios.post another value, which is an object. When we use post, we can also send information to the backend using an object, and this is called the request body. Now, the backend needs to know two things in order to add a product to the cart. First, it needs to know the product ID that we want to add. In this case, this button is for, if we scroll up, the button is for this product right here. So at the bottom, we're going to tell the backend we want to add this product.id to the cart. And we also need another information, which is the quantity that we want to add. For now, let's just use the quantity 1. So this code will send a request to the backend, telling it to add this product to the cart with a quantity of 1. So now let's save this file, and then we'll go to the website, and we're going to go to this t-shirt product, and we're going to click Add to Cart. And then we're going to refresh the page. And now, if we look at the cart here, we have one more product. The quantity is 4. If we open the cart and we scroll to the bottom, notice that it added the t-shirt to the cart. So that's how we do data mutation or update data in the backend. We just send a request to the backend, and the backend takes care of updating and saving the data. So in the real world, we use the backend to manage and update the data. Next, Notice that when we added this product to the cart, we had to refresh the page to see the new cart. It would be better if we could just reload the cart and update the page without needing to refresh. We'll go to our code, and at the bottom, we're going to go to app.jsx. So here, this code reloads the cart from the backend, and it updates the state. After it updates the state, React will update the page. So when we add a product to the cart, we just need to rerun this code, and it will update the page. And then we don't have to refresh the page every time. We're going to select this entire function, and we'll cut, and outside the use effect, we're going to paste it. And now that it's outside the use effect, we can share this function with our components. Now, let's actually rename this function to something more accurate, like load cart. And in here, load cart. And now we can share this with our components using a prop. So we're going to scroll down here, and in the home page, we're going to give it the prop load cart equals curly brackets, and we'll give it the function load cart and save. And now if we go to the home page, at the top, we'll get load cart out of the props and then give it to the products grid component. So remember, this component contains the add to cart button. So in here, we'll give it another prop, load cart equals curly brackets, and give it the load cart function and save. And now inside the products grid, at the top, we're going to get load cart out of the props. And then if we scroll back down, after we update the cart, we're going to call the function load cart. So this means we will update the cart in the backend, and then we'll get the new cart and update the page without needing to refresh. One other thing we have to do here is, remember, Axios.post contacts the backend. So this is asynchronous code. It does not finish right away. That means we need to wait for this code to finish before going on to the next line. To wait for this to finish, at the front of this code, we can type await and space. And remember, in order to use await, we need to be inside an async function. So we'll add async. And also, this code is not inside a use effect. So we can just use async directly here, like this. After that, load cart is also asynchronous. So it's a good idea to await this code as well to be consistent. So now let's save, and we'll check the website. And first we'll go back to the home page. And this time, let's click add to cart on this toaster. So we'll click add to cart. And now notice that the quantity here updated to 5 without needing to refresh. If we go to the cart and scroll down, it also updated the cart on the page without needing to refresh. We'll go back to the home page, and we're going to make these quantity selectors work. So this lets us add more than one product to the cart at a time. We're going to go to our code, and first we need to get the quantity in the quantity selector. To do that, we're going to use a controlled input. We learned controlled inputs when creating the text box in the chatbot project. So as a review, we'll scroll up, and we're going to create a state to save the quantity. At the top, we're going to import curly brackets use state from React. And in this component, we're going to create a state. Const square bracket equals use state and brackets. And we're going to name the state the quantity, comma, and the updater function set quantity. and we'll set the starting value of the quantity to 1. Then we're going to scroll down and we're going to find this select element. So this element represents the selector on the page. And we're going to give this 2 props. The first prop is the value equals curly brackets, and the value is the quantity. The second prop is on change equals curly brackets, and we're going to give this a function. So brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And whenever we use an event handler like onClick or onChange, this function gets a parameter called event. So event contains details about the event. In this case, the event will contain the quantity that we selected, which is one of these values. To get the quantity that we selected, we can use event.target.value. And let's save the quantity we selected in a variable. At the front, we'll create const quantity selected equals this value. Now, one thing to be careful of is this value is going to be one of these values here. And these are going to be a string. So we need to convert it into a number. To do that, around this value, we're going to use the code capital N number, open bracket, and close bracket. So this will convert the string here into a number. So now that we have the quantity that we selected, let's save it into the state using set quantity brackets quantity selected. So this is called a controlled input when we have a value and an onChange property. When we change the selector, it's going to set the quantity in the state, and then the new state is going to be set as the value, and then it updates the page. So we're basically putting React in the middle of this process so that we have access to the quantity that we selected. And that's a review of how controlled inputs work. And let's also console.log the quantity selected to see if it works. So we'll save and we'll go to the website and we're going to open the console with right-click, inspect, and the console. And now on the website, we're going to click the quantity selector here and we'll select 3. And now inside the console, it displays the quantity that we selected. However, there is a problem here. Notice on this website, when we change one quantity selector, it changes all of them. So if I change this one here to 5, it changes all the quantities. So let's fix this. We'll go back to the code. And if we scroll to the top, this is happening because the state here is outside of this loop. So that means the state is shared across all the products. That's why when we change one selector, it changes all of them. To solve this problem, we need to move this state inside this loop so that each product has its own quantity. So we're going to select this code and cut. And inside this loop, we're going to paste. However, this code actually breaks the rules of React hooks. We can only put hooks at the top level of a component. We should not put hooks inside a loop like this. To fix this problem, we can separate each product into its own component. So inside the home folder, we're going to create a new file and we'll name it product.jsx. And we'll create a component for each product, which is export function product, brackets and curly brackets. And we're going to return the HTML for each product. Inside the products grid, we're going to collapse this code. And this is the code for each product. So we'll select it and copy. And inside the product component, we're going to paste. And then Control or Command Shift P, format document. We'll scroll up And we'll go back to the products grid. And we also need to copy over the state. So we're going to select this, copy, and inside product at the top, we're going to paste. And we'll fix these errors. So first we need to import use state. At the top, we'll import curly brackets use state from React. And the product, we'll get it from the props using curly brackets product. Scroll down. We'll need the format money function, as well as Axios and load cart. So first, we'll import curly brackets format money from a string, and we'll find //utils/money. At the top, we're going to import Axios from Axios, and we'll get the load cart function from the props. So comma load cart and save. So now each product has a separate state. It has its own quantity. And this is no longer breaking the rules of hooks because this state is at the top level of this component. We'll go back to the products grid. And here we can remove this HTML and just use our component less than product / greater than. And we need to give it the product equals product, and also the load cart function equals load cart. And we can remove this state. And remember, when we loop through an array, we need to give it a key prop. So at the front here, we'll set a key equals curly brackets, and we'll set it to the product.id. And finally, we need to import this component. So we'll scroll up, and at the top, we'll import curly brackets, the product component from a string, and it's right beside this file. So we'll do ./product. And we can remove these because they're no longer being used. And save. And since we have the key in this loop here, we can also go into the product and remove the key in here. And save. Now let's open the website. And if we change one of these selectors, notice that each product can now have its own quantity. Now that we have this quantity, when we add a product to the cart, let's use this quantity. We'll go to our code, and we're going to go inside each product, and we're going to scroll down to the Add to Cart button here. And instead of adding a quantity of 1 every time, we're going to add the quantity that is saved in the state above. So now let's save, and we'll try out this code. We'll open the website, and let's go to this plate product, and we're going to select a quantity of 3 this time. And we'll click Add to Cart. And notice that the cart updated, and it now has a quantity of 8, which is 3 more than before. If we open the cart and we scroll to the bottom, we now have 3 of these plates in the cart. So now the quantity selector is working. Let's go back to the home page. And this time, let's try adding a product that already exists in the cart. So for the plate product, we're going to select the quantity of 3 again, and we're going to click Add to Cart. Notice the cart quantity increased by 3, and if we open the cart and scroll down, instead of adding a new plate product, it just increased the quantity by 3 for a total of 6. So if the product already exists in the cart, the backend handles this situation for us and just increases the quantity. Remember, the purpose of the backend is to manage the data. By letting the backend manage and update the data, we can simplify our React code. Let's go back to our code, and we're going to do some cleanup in this component. First, instead of doing quantity : quantity, we can use the shorthand property syntax. and just use the quantity. It does the same thing as before. Next, instead of putting our event handlers directly in the HTML like this, we usually save this in a separate function. So let's select all this code and copy, and we're going to scroll up, and at the top, we're going to create a function const add to cart equals, and we'll paste that code. So we usually save the function separately like this, and then we can scroll down. We can remove this code and just use the function name add to cart. And this makes the code easier to read. Next, we'll scroll up to the quantity selector. We can remove the console.log, and we'll move this into a separate function as well. We'll select this code and copy, and we'll scroll up. And here, we're going to create another function, const select quantity, and make it equal, and we'll paste that code. And we'll use this function below. So down here, instead of putting this function directly in the HTML, we'll use the function name select quantity and save. And that's it. We created the add to cart feature. In the final project, there's a small message that pops up when we click add to cart, but I'll leave this as an exercise. Now let's save this into Git. We'll open the Git section, and let's use the message create add to cart feature and commit. Before we continue, I want to go back to the code that we wrote. So we're going to scroll up in this component, and I want to explain axios.post a little more. As a review, when we send a request to the backend, we can set a URL path. Based on the URL path, the backend can do different things. For example, if we use /API/products, the backend gives us the products. If we use /API/cart items, the backend gives us the cart. In addition to the URL path, every request also has a type. In the previous lesson, when we did axios.get/API/cart items, this actually sends the type get and the URL path /API/cart items to the backend. So it sends two pieces of information to the backend, the type and the URL path. When we did axios.post/API/cart items, this sends the type post and the URL path /API/cart items to the backend. Now, when the backend receives our request, it looks at both the type and the URL path to decide what to do. For example, if the backend receives get and /API/cart items, it will get the cart items and return it. If the backend receives post and /API/cart items, it will create a new cart item. So both the type and the URL path together determine what the backend does. In the description, I have a documentation page for my backend, and it lists all the different requests that my backend supports. Notice that each request has a type and a URL path. By the way, the type is also called a HTTP method. When working with a backend, there are 4 common types of requests that we use: get, post, put, and delete. Get means we want to get some data. Post means we want to create some data. Put means we want to update some data. And delete means we want to delete some data. So Axios has a method for each type. Axios.get sets the type of request to get. Axios.post sets the type to post. Axios.put sets the type to put. And Axios.delete sets the type to delete. And then between the brackets, we put the URL path. So in our code, this sends a request to the backend with the type post and the URL path /API/cart items. So the most important thing to remember here is that each request has a type and a URL path, and both of these determine what the backend will do. In the rest of this lesson, we'll get more practice sending different types of requests to the backend. Next, let's go back to the website. And inside the checkout page, for each product, we have these delivery options. So we're going to add the ability to update the delivery option. Because we're updating something in the cart, we're going to practice using a put request. First, let's find the code for these delivery options. We'll go back to our code and open our files. And we're going to find the pages and checkout folder, and we're going to open deliveryoptions.jsx. And we'll scroll down. And here, each of these represents one delivery option on the page. So we're going to put an onClick property on this element. Now, usually we put the onClick on the input, but in this case, this will make only the radio selector clickable. Instead, we want the entire delivery option, including the text, to be clickable. So that's why we're going to put the onClick on the outside component. So we're going to add the onClick attribute equals curly brackets, and let's create a function for this. Above this, we'll create a function with const, and let's name it update delivery option equals, and let's make it an async function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets, because we know we're going to make a request to the backend to update the delivery option. Also, we create the function here inside of this loop because we need access to each delivery option. So next, to update the delivery option for a product, we're going to make a request to the backend. We're going to scroll to the top, and at the top, we'll import Axios from Axios. And we'll scroll back down. And inside here, according to my documentation, my backend supports the request put/API/cart items. This lets us update the cart. For example, we can update the delivery option for a product. So we're going to do axios.put brackets. This sends a request with the type put to the backend. And we'll set the URL path to /API/cart-items. And we'll add another slash, and we're going to insert the product ID that we want to update here at the end of the URL path. So in my documentation, :product ID is known as a URL parameter. This means my backend wants the product ID we want to update inside the URL. This is just a naming convention that is popular with backends. When we update something, we usually put the ID of what we want to update inside the URL. So here, first we're going to change this to a template string using backticks. And then at the end, we'll insert $curly brackets, and we're going to insert the product ID that we want to update. So the product ID is saved inside the cart item. So inside here, we're going to insert the cart item dot product ID. Next, we need to tell the backend which delivery option we want to update to. To do that, we're going to give the backend some data. At the end of this, we'll add a comma and an object. And in my documentation, this section tells us what data we can send to the backend. Here, we can send the delivery option ID that we want to update to. So we're going to give the backend the delivery option ID that we want to update to. So if we scroll up here, we want to update to this delivery option. So we'll tell the backend to update to the delivery option.id. And after we update the delivery option, we're going to reload the cart and update the page. So in front of this, let's wait for this to finish using await. And remember, we created a function for reloading the cart called load cart. So inside app.jsx, we're going to share load cart with the checkout page. So down here, we'll add a prop, load cart equals curly brackets, load cart, and save. And then inside the checkout page, at the top, we're going to get load cart. And now we need to share this with the delivery options. Now the delivery options are actually inside the order summary. So we're going to share it with the order summary first. We'll scroll down to the order summary. And here, we're going to give it the load cart equals curly brackets, load cart, and save. Inside the order summary, at the top, we're going to get from the props load cart, and then we're going to share it with the delivery options. So we'll scroll down to these delivery options, and we'll give it the prop load cart equals curly brackets, load cart, and save. And finally, in the delivery options, we can get load cart from the props. So comma load cart, and scroll down. After we update the delivery option, we're going to await load cart and brackets so that we reload the cart and update the page, and we don't have to refresh to see the updates. Finally, we're going to take this function and put it in this on click. So update delivery option and save. Now let's go to the website and we'll try changing a delivery option. And now you can see that it updates when we change the delivery option. Now, one last thing here is if we open the console, we're going to get this warning message saying we provided a checked property without an onChange handler. So let's fix this warning. We're going to go back to the code. And the warning means that for an input element, if we have a checked prop, we should also have an onChange prop. OnChange lets us change the value of this input. However, in our situation, we already use this onClick up here to change the value of the input. So we don't really need an onChange property. So in here, to get rid of that warning, we can just add an onChange property equals curly brackets and give it an empty function. And this will just make the warning go away. We'll save and go back to our website. And let's refresh. And now if we change the delivery option and check the console, we no longer get that warning. Next, we have another problem on this page, which is when we update the delivery option, the payment summary here is not updating to show the new delivery price. To fix this, after we update a delivery option, we also want to reload the payment summary. So let's find the code for reloading the payment summary. We'll go to our code, and we're going to open the checkout page. And we're going to scroll up, and inside this use effect, we have this code here that reloads the payment summary. So we want to rerun this code after updating the delivery option. Now, we could separate this into a function and then share it like we did with load cart. However, we have an easier option here. Remember that in use effect, at the end, we have this dependency array. So this array determines when use effect runs. Right now, it's empty, which means use effect will only run once. However, we can put values inside this array. And whenever a value changes, it will rerun the use effect. In our situation, we can put the value cart inside this dependency array. And now, whenever the cart changes, it will rerun the use effect and update the payment summary. And that makes sense. Every time the cart changes, we do want to update the payment summary in case the cost of the order changes. So in React, there are often multiple solutions to do something, and we should try to pick the cleanest solution. Also note that this will cause the delivery options to be reloaded, which is not really necessary. So we could separate reloading the payment summary into another use effect, but I'll leave this as an exercise. So now let's save, and we'll go to our website. And now when we update the delivery option, notice that the payment summary also updates to show the new delivery price. And now this feature is working. So now let's save this into Git. We'll go back to our code and open the Git section. And here we'll use the message create update delivery option feature and commit. Next, we're going to go to our website and we're going to work on deleting an item from the cart. So we're going to practice making a delete request to the backend. First, we're going to find the code for this delete link. We'll go to our code, and in our files, we're going to find the order summary component. And we're going to scroll down in this component and find the delete link. If you did the exercises, this might be inside a cart item details component. Now for this delete link, we're going to add an onClick attribute equals curly brackets, and we'll give this a function to run. Let's call it delete cart item. And let's create this function above. So I'm going to scroll up, and I'm going to create the function inside this loop because I need access to this cart item to delete. So in here, we'll create the function const delete cart item equals a function. And let's make this an async function because we know we're going to make a request to the backend. And first, let's import Axios. So we'll scroll up, and at the top, we'll import Axios from a string Axios. And then inside this function, my backend can receive a request called delete/API/cart items. And this will delete a product from the cart. So we'll do Axios.delete and brackets. This sends a request with the type delete to the backend. For the URL path, we're going to use a template string, and we'll do /API/cart-items/ and we're going to insert the product ID in the URL again. This is just a naming convention that my backend uses. So we're going to insert the ID of what we want to delete. In this case, we need to give the backend the product ID we want to delete. So the product ID is saved inside the cart item. So we're going to give the backend the cart item.product ID. And that's it. When my backend receives a request with the type delete and this URL path, it's going to delete this product from the cart. So after deleting the product, let's reload the cart. First, at the front of this, we'll type await to wait for this code to finish. And then we're going to await load the cart and brackets. So I have load cart already in the order summary. If you did the exercises from the previous lesson, you may need to pass this function into your component using a prop. So now let's go down, and that's all we need to delete a product from the cart and then reload and update the page. Let's save. We'll go to the website, and we're going to delete this first product. And notice it updates the cart and it also updates the payment summary. If we delete another product, you'll notice it updates the cart and updates the payment summary. So that's how we make the delete link work. I'll leave updating the quantity in the cart as an exercise. So now let's save this into Git. We'll open the Git section, and then here we'll use the message create delete cart item feature and commit. Let's go back to the website. And in the checkout page, we're going to add the ability to create an order. So first, let's find the code for this place order button. We'll go back to our code. And in our files, we're going to open the payment summary component. And we're going to scroll down to the bottom to this place order button. And to this button, we're going to add a prop on click equals curly brackets, and we'll give it a function. Let's call it create order. And now let's scroll up and create this function. So up here, we're going to create const, and we'll name it create order equals an async function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. Again, we're going to make a request to the backend to create the order. So at the top, we're going to import Axios from a string Axios. And in here, for my backend, we can send a request with the type post and the URL path /API/orders to create an order. So we'll use the code axios.post to make a request with the type post and then give it the URL path /API/orders. And that's all we need. Remember, the cart is already saved in the backend. So the backend can take that cart and create an order for us. So let's wait for this code to finish using await. And after we create an order, the backend will remove everything from our cart. So we also need to reload our cart here. First, we need to get the load cart function, and that can be found in the checkout page. So here we get load cart from the props, and we're going to share this with the payment summary. So we'll scroll down, and in the payment summary, we'll share load cart using a prop load cart equals curly brackets load cart and save. And then inside the payment summary, at the top, in the props, we'll get comma load cart. And now after we create an order, we're going to await load cart and brackets to reload the cart and update the page. Finally, after we create an order, let's also redirect to the orders page so we can see our new order. To do that, React Router provides a hook that lets us navigate to another page or go to another page. At the top, we're going to import curly brackets, use navigate from React-router. And at the top of our component, we're going to use const navigate equals use navigate and brackets. So use navigate gives us a function, and this function lets us navigate to or go to another page in our app. So after we create an order and we reload the cart, let's navigate to the orders page using navigate, brackets, and a string, and we're going to navigate to /orders. Now, navigate is not asynchronous, so it finishes immediately, and we don't need to await this code. Let's save, and we'll go to the website and test out the place order button. So we could update the delivery option to get a shipping cost, and then click Place Order. And now you can see that it created a new order. You'll also see that it updated the cart, so the quantity is now 0, and it navigated us to the Orders page. Once we are on the Orders page, there's some code at the top of the Orders page that loads the orders from the backend and updates the page. And that's how we're able to see our newest order here. So that's how we create an order. I'll leave making these Add to Cart buttons work as an exercise. So now we finished all the major features of our project. We can add products to our cart, we can update the cart, and we can create an order. And you'll see that in the real world, we use a backend to manage and update all the data. And in our React code, we just make requests to the backend and then update the page. The advantage of letting the backend manage the data is that it will simplify our code a lot. So now let's save this into Git. Go to the Git section, and at the top, we'll type make create order button work and commit. And now we finished all the major features of our project. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to create automated tests in React to make sure our code still works whenever we make changes. And that's the end of this lesson. In this lesson, we learned data mutation, which means to update data in the backend. We learned different types of requests, like get, post, put, and delete. We sent a post request to add products to the cart and to create an order. We sent a put request to update the cart. We sent a delete request to delete a product from the cart. We used the dependency array of useEffect to update the payment summary whenever the cart changes. We learned the useNavigate hook, which lets us navigate to another page using our code. Thanks for watching so far. If you find this course valuable, you can support the channel by liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing. You can also check out the premium version of this course, where you'll get all the lessons ads-free, broken down into small videos, as well as additional lessons and more projects that are not in the public React course. Currently, the premium course contains 11 lessons, and I'll be adding more lessons in the future. You can also get a certificate of completion, create comments or questions on specific topics, get progress tracking, search, and course notes. You can also check out the membership, where you can get this course ads-free, separated by each lesson, AI videos, backend tutorials, and more. Thanks again, and let's continue with the course. Here are some exercises to help you practice what we learned in this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to add automated tests to our app. Automated tests means using code to test our app. This is more efficient than manually opening the app and clicking around to test it. To create automated tests in React, we're going to use an npm package. The two most popular packages for automated testing are Jest and vtest. We're going to use vtest because it integrates well with Vite, but Jest and vtest are very similar. If you learn one, you can easily learn the other. First, we're going to install vtest to our project. So we're going to go to our command line and open the tab that's running the front end, and we'll stop the Vite server using Control-C, and we're going to npm install --save -dev vtest. So save dev means that vtest is only for development. This package is not needed to run our app or to run our website. And we're also going to add @ to give vtest a specific version. So you can click this link in the description, go to lesson 9, and here you'll find the version of vtest that we'll install. So we'll copy that version and then paste it in here and press enter to install vtest. Now that we installed vtest, we're ready to create our first automated test. So there are different types of automated tests that we can create. The first type is called unit tests. A unit test means we test one unit or one piece of the code. For example, if we look at our files and we open our utils folder and open money.js, if we test a function like format money, this would be considered a unit test because it's just one piece of the code. However, if we test something like the product component here, testing components like this are not unit tests because they use many different pieces of code together. So we'll start by creating unit tests for format money. So we're going to go to this money.js file, and beside this file, we're going to create a new file for the tests. And we'll name it the same, money, but this time we'll end with .test.js. So the naming convention is to put it beside the original file and end it with .test.js. Now inside this test file, at the top we'll import curly brackets it from a string vtest. So it lets us create a test. And we'll also import the format money function from a string and import it from this file, ./money. And now to create our first test, we're going to use it and brackets, and we'll give this a string. So this creates a test, and the string here is the name of the test. So this describes what we are testing. So let's give it a name like formats 1999 cents as $19.99. If we run format money with 1999, it should give us $19.99 as the result. So this name is describing what we want to test. And a naming convention is to make this read like English. For example, it formats 1999 as 19.99. And then we're going to give this a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And in here, we're going to test if format money works correctly. To do that, we're also going to import expect from vtest. So expect lets us check if the result is correct. So in here, we're going to run expect and brackets. And in here, we put the code that we want to test. For example, let's put the code format money brackets and 1999. And then expect has different methods that we can use to check this result. One method is called .to b and brackets. So in this second bracket, we can put the expected result of this code. So we said that the expected result should be this string here. So we'll give it $19.99. So this code tests if this value is equal to this value. If they are equal, this check has passed. If they are not equal, this check has failed. And then expect is going to send this result to vtest. and vtest will display a summary of what passed and what failed. So now let's run this test. We're going to save this file, and then in our command line, we're going to create a new tab for running the tests. And first, we have to be inside the e-commerce project folder. So we'll cd e-commerce-project, and we're going to run npx vtest. So vtest is going to search our code for all the files that end with .test.js and runs the tests inside. And then it displays the result in the command line. So this tells us that our format money test here has passed. Now let's create another test for format money. We'll go back to this test file. And to create another test, we're just going to use it again and a string. And remember that we had some problems with money not showing 2 decimals. So let's test if it displays 2 decimals and give it a function. And now inside here, we can run expect and brackets, format money, brackets, and let's give it a value that might not show 2 decimals, like 1090. And then we'll check if this is correct using .2b and brackets and a string. And the expected result of this code should be $10.90. So we're going to check if this result is equal to this result. If we save, vtest is actually watching our files for changes. So when we save, it will automatically rerun our tests. And now you can see we have 2 tests that passed. Next, inside each test, we can have multiple checks. So in here, let's add another check using expect, brackets, and let's try format money, brackets with a different value, like 100. So we expect this to be $1.00. So we'll do .2b brackets $1.00 and save. Now vtest will rerun all of our tests, and now you can see that both tests still passed. So when we have multiple checks like this, all of the checks have to pass in order for this test to pass. If one of these checks fails, the entire test will fail and it will show up here. So as a quick example, if I change this and save, one of these checks failed, so we can see that this test has failed. So I'm going to add it back and save. Next, if we look at our file here, notice that these tests are related to the format money function. A best practice is to group these tests together. To do that, at the top, we're also going to import describe from vtest. So describe groups tests together. We call a group of tests a test suite. So above these tests, we're going to use the code describe and brackets, and we'll give this a string. And this is the name of the test suite or the group of tests. So these tests are for the format money function. And we'll give it a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. And we're going to move our tests inside. So we'll select it and cut and paste and save. And everything still passes. And we can see the test suite name over here. So test suites basically help us keep our tests more organized. If we want to test a different function inside this file, we would create another test suite and group our tests in there. So a best practice is to always put our tests inside a test suite, even if we only have one test suite. So now let's save this into Git. We're going to go to the Git section, and let's use the message, create unit tests for format money, and commit. Next, we'll create another type of test called an integration test. Integration test means we test multiple units or pieces of code working together. For example, if we look at our files and we open the product component, testing a component would be considered an integration test. Notice this uses multiple pieces of code, like the format money function and the load cart function. So now let's create tests for this file. Beside product.js, we're going to create a new file, and we'll name it product.test.jsx. So we end with .jsx this time, because this will let us use component syntax in this file, like this. So first, let's actually copy the imports from our money test file, because we're going to be using these again. So we'll copy, and in here, we'll paste. But this time, we're going to import the product component from the ./product file. And first, we're going to create a test suite. So we use describe, brackets, and a string. And we're going to be testing the product component. And give this a function. And inside, we'll create our first integration test using it, brackets, and a string. And for components, the first thing we can check is if the component is displayed correctly. So for the product component, we can check if the name is correct, the image is correct, and so on. So we'll name this test, it displays the product details correctly. And we'll give it a function. And now inside here, how do we check if this component displayed the details correctly? So when testing a function, we run the function and check the result. When testing a component, we render the component and check the result. So render means to display the component on the page. To render the component in our test, we need to add some more npm packages. So we're going to go to our command line. And right now, vtest is watching all of our files for changes. So we're going to stop vtest using Control-C, or you can press Q to quit. And now, we're going to click this link in the description, go to lesson 9, and we're going to install all of these npm packages that we need. So we're going to select this and copy, and then in our command line, we're going to paste this command. And press Enter to install all these packages. After installing, we also need to create some config files to test our components. So we'll go to our files, and we'll scroll down and find vite.config.js and click it. And we're going to create a new file and name this vtest.config.js. And we'll click this link in the description and go to lesson 9. We're going to copy this setup code. So we're going to select this and copy. And then in here, we'll paste that code. And save. And we're also going to create another file beside this. So here, create a new file called setup, capital T, tests.js. And we'll click the link in the description again and go to lesson 9. And we're going to copy this code and paste it in here. And save. So that's just some setup that we need to do. If we look at this config file, you don't have to worry too much about how this works. This is just some standard setup. These two are required for component tests or integration tests to work. And this basically runs the code inside this file before all of our tests. So in this file, we import just DOM, and this basically adds a bunch of methods to expect that help us test components. Now that we have the setup, we're going to go back to our test. And at the top, we're going to import curly brackets render from the package at testing-library/React. So this renders or displays a component in a fake web page, specifically for testing. Inside our test, we're going to use the render function and brackets. And we'll tell it to render the product component using less than product/greater than. So next, the product component has some props. So we need to provide these props in our test. So in here, we're going to add the prop product equals curly brackets. And we're going to provide a sample product to test with. To do that, in our files, we're going to go to the starting code folder and open the data folder and open products.js. And here we have a bunch of sample products that we can use. So let's just select the first product and copy it. And then in our test, we're going to save the sample product in a variable const product equals and paste. And we're going to take this product and save it as the product prop. Next, we also need to provide a load cart function to this component. So in our app, load cart actually contacts the backend. However, in our tests, we should not contact a real backend because the backend might not be available during tests, and our tests might accidentally update real data. So instead, a best practice is to mock this function in our tests. Mock means to create a fake version of this function. To create a mock, at the top, we're going to import vi from vtest. And we'll scroll back down and we'll create const load cart equals vi.fn and brackets. So vi.fn basically creates a fake function that doesn't do anything. So this fake function is called a mock. And we're going to give this mock to the component. So here, we'll create a prop load cart equals curly bracket and our mock load cart. And this will prevent our component from accidentally contacting the backend in our tests. And that's it. This will render the product component on a fake web page. So now, how do we check if this component was displayed correctly? We can't see the fake web page, but we can check it using our code. To do that, we're going to scroll up and we'll also import the screen from testing library/React. So screen lets us check the screen or the fake web page to see if everything was rendered correctly. In our test, after we render the component, we're going to use screen and the method .getByText and brackets. So this searches the screen or the fake web page for an element with a specific text. So we'll give it a string And first, let's check if the product name is displayed correctly. So we'll scroll up and we're going to copy this product name. And then in here, we're going to paste. And this will search the screen or the fake web page for an element with this text inside. So now we're going to check if this element exists. That will tell us if we displayed the correct product on the page. To do that, before this code, we'll use expect and open bracket, and at the end, a close bracket, and we'll use the method dot to be in the document and brackets. So this method is added by testing library /just-dom. And this checks if this element exists on the screen or on the fake web page. So now let's save and we'll run this test using vtest. In the command line, we'll run npx vtest. And all of our tests passed. Next, let's add some more checks to this test. So let's also check if the price was displayed correctly. So here, we'll add another expect brackets, and we'll use screen.getByText and a string, and we're going to search for the price on the screen. So for the sample product, the price should be $10.90. So we'll scroll down and search for $10.90 on the screen, and we expect this dot to be in the document and brackets. And save, and Vite will rerun the test and tell us that this passed. Next, let's check if the product image is correct. So down here, we'll use another expect brackets, screen, dot, but this time we can't use getByText because we're trying to find an image. Instead, we're going to add a test ID to the image element. So in our files, we'll open the product component, and we're going to scroll down until we find the product image here. And for this element, we're going to add an attribute data-test ID equals a string product-image. So this ID lets us find the image element in our tests. We could also use the class name to find this element, but if we change our class name, it will break the test. To avoid this, we usually use an ID specifically for testing, like this. So now let's save. And in our test, we'll use screen.getByTestID and brackets and a string and the test ID product-image. So this will give us the image element in the product component. Now let's check if this image element's source attribute is equal to the product's image up here. So we'll select this image and copy. And then down here, dot to have attribute, brackets, and we'll check the source attribute if it's equal to the string and paste the image from our sample product and save. vtest will rerun our tests and everything passed. So we know we're displaying the correct image. Next, let's check the ratings image and the rating count. Feel free to pause if you want to try it yourself first. So first we'll do expect, open bracket, the screen dot, and we'll check the ratings image first. So we'll go to the product component, and we're going to scroll down until we find the image product rating stars, and we'll give this a data-test ID equals product rating stars image, and save. And let's just select this test ID and copy. And in our test, we'll get by test ID brackets a string and paste. And we expect this dot to have attribute brackets the source attribute equals a string. And we'll go back to the product component. And let's just copy the source attribute here. So we'll select it and copy. And inside our test, we're going to paste. Now for our sample product, we have a rating of 4.5. So that means we take 4.5 and multiply it by 10. We're going to get the value 45. And this is the rating image that should be displayed on the page. So we'll save. And vtest tells us everything passed. Finally, let's check the rating count. So we'll expect brackets, screen, dot, and this time we're looking for text. So we can just use get by text, brackets, and for this sample product, the count is 87. So we'll look for the string 87. And we expect this dot to be in the document and save. vtest will rerun and everything passed. So now we tested if the product component displayed all the details correctly. So let's save this into Git. We'll open the Git section and we'll use the message create integration test for product component and commit. Next, we're going to test user interactions. In the product component, we have an add to cart button. We can also test clicking this add to cart button to see if it behaves correctly. So in our test file, let's create a new test using it, brackets, and a string, and let's name it adds a product to the cart, and give it a function. So first, let's render the product component again. So we'll scroll up, and let's just copy all of this code. So we'll select it to here, and copy. And then in our second test, we're going to paste. So this sets up the sample product and the mock, and then renders the product component again. So now that we rendered this, how do we click the add to cart button in our test? Earlier, we installed a package called testing library/user event. This package lets us simulate events like clicking a button. So at the top of our test, we're going to scroll up and we'll import user event from the package at testing-library/user-event. So this lets us simulate events like a click. So now we'll scroll back down to our test. And first, we need to set up user event using const user equals user event dot setup and brackets. So now we can simulate events using user dot click. So this simulates a click event, and inside the brackets, we're going to tell it which element to click. So we want it to click the add to cart button. So first, we need to get the add to cart button inside our test. We'll go to our files And in the product component, let's scroll down to the add to cart button. And we're going to give this a data-test ID equals a string add to cart button. And let's select this test ID and copy and save. And then in the product test, we're going to get the button using screen.get by test ID brackets and a string, and we'll paste the test ID. So this will get the add to cart button from the screen. So let's save it in a variable, const add to cart button equals, and we're going to give this to user.click. Add to cart button. Next, when we click this button, it takes some time for the page to process the click. So user.click takes some time to finish. That means this is asynchronous code, and it returns a promise. To wait for this to finish, at the front, we're going to use await. And remember, to use await, we need to be inside an async function. So above, in this function, we're going to make it async. And we'll scroll back down. And now, once we click the add to cart button, this is going to make a request to the backend using axios.post. But remember, in our tests, we should not contact a real backend because we might accidentally update real data. So earlier, we mocked load cart and replaced it with a fake function. Now, we're also going to mock Axios, so we can actually mock an entire NPM package. To do that, at the top, we're going to use the code vi.mock brackets and the string Axios. So this mocks the entire Axios package. This means that when we are testing, when we import from Axios, we will get a fake version of Axios instead. So when we click add to cart, it will use the fake version of Axios and it will do nothing. It will not contact the backend. So now, what should we test? We can still test that our code ran axios.post, and we can test if we gave axios.post the correct values. To do that, at the top, we're also going to import Axios from the package Axios. And because of vi.mock, this is a fake version of Axios. So now we can scroll back down. And after we click add to cart, we can expect brackets axios.post. If we give a mock to expect, we can check if our code ran axios.post and if we gave it the correct values using the method .to have been called with and brackets. So we expect our code to call axios.post with /API/cart items. So in here, we'll check if the first value we gave it was /API/cart-items. And we also expect our code to give axios.post an object with a product ID and a quantity. So in here, we can also check if we gave it an object with a product ID : and we're going to get the product ID of our sample product. So here, we'll select this ID and copy and scroll back down and create a string and paste the ID. And we expect the quantity : to be 1 because we did not change the quantity selector. So this basically checks that when we click add to cart, does our code run axios.post and give it these values. So even though mocks don't do anything, we can still check if we called them and we gave them the correct values. Next, we can also check if our code ran load cart. So remember that load cart is also a mock. So we can see if our code ran load cart. So down here, we can also expect load cart, and we don't give load cart any values. So we can just use .to have been called and brackets. So this just checks if our code called load cart and does not check what values we gave it. So now let's save, and vtest will run our code, and everything still passed. So that's how we test user interactions. We create some mocks, and then we check if our code ran the mock and gave it the correct values. So now let's save this into Git. In the Git section, we'll use the message test clicking add to cart button and commit. Before we move on, we're going to do some code cleanup. Notice that in each of our tests, we have some setup code at the top, where we create some sample data and mock load cart. So we can actually share this setup code between our tests. To do that, we can move these two variables outside of this it function. So we'll select this code and cut, and outside of this function, we'll paste. Now that these two variables are outside of this function, because of scope, these can be accessed anywhere inside this outer describe function. So that means it can be accessed in both tests. So in the second test, we can just remove this setup code because now it's shared between the two tests up here. Another recommendation is to recreate shared variables before each test, because if one test modifies a variable, that change is going to carry over into the next test, which can cause bugs. So before each test, we're going to recreate these variables. To do that, we can use before capital E each brackets, and we'll give this a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. So before each runs some code before each test. And also we need to import before each. So at the top, we'll import before each from vtest. So we want to recreate these shared variables before each test. So we're going to do that in here. Inside, we'll use product equals, and let's just select this value and cut. And in here, we'll paste. And because we're modifying this variable, we need to change from const to let. And we'll also recreate load cart in before each. So here, we'll do load cart equals vi